Hey everybody, what's buzzin'? I'm JW and I'm part of the team behind Discroom together with Kitty Calis, Terri Vellmann and Doseone. And today I'm going to show you how to program your very own saw blade chamber, so let's get right to it.
Alright, we'll be using GameMaker Studio 1 for this, which is what I'm personally the most comfortable with, and I think when making games, that's the most important thing. We made Discroom mostly in GameMaker Studio 1, Minute as well, Nuclear Throne. So yeah, and we'll also be sharing this source file with you so you can take a look at it. If anything ever goes super fast or whatever, just look it up, take your time. So let's get started. When making a game, I like to start making a sprite for the player. So let's just draw that real quick. I think trying to get the gameplay in right away so you can move something around is always a really good start. I'm just gonna draw a little self-portrait here. It's gonna be really ugly because we don't want anyone, getting too attached to the art of this example file if they want to use it for the game jam, right? You gotta do your own stuff. So that's me. Alright, and then I'm gonna give myself a little walking animation real quick. Alright, so for walking you always need 4 frames. It's the most important thing. So you move up on every other frame. And then we remove the legs on the high ones. That's the trick, I think. Let's take a look. This is not like a traditional programming tutorial. I'm just going to show you literally how to make Discroom, which is kind of the point here. So there we go. Alright. Beautiful. That's me walking. Alright, I always like to center the origin so that everything is calculated from the middle of the character. And then for a game like this, it's very important to have collision masks that are not weird. So I'm gonna make those really small and tiny. Let's do this. Let's add full image and then just remove 10 everywhere. How about that? See how that looks. So 10, 10, 21, 21, whatever, that's gonna work. So you want to give the player a lot of space to kind of dodge around with, so this is perfect. Alright, then we also need a disc, right? It's Discroom. Drawing discs is actually super hard. I don't know how Terri and Kitty do it, but I learned a little trick that I'm gonna show you that's gonna be super useful. So if you draw 2 circles in like an ugly color that you're not gonna use, I mean, nothing wrong with yellow, but I'm not gonna use it. And then you draw like 8 lines. This is like, I'm not an artist, but this is how I do it. Like this. And then you kind of just connect the intersecting points like that. You've got a pretty okay saw blade, to get started. It's good enough for what I'm doing. And I mean, the main point here is to have fun, right? And then we're just gonna erase all that, those colors that we're not using. Let's see, replace. And then we need a nice shiny metal saw blade color. Whoop. There you go. Alright, beautiful saw blade. If you have a wobbly saw blade, you just have to make it spin faster so it looks more regular. I think that's also a good tip. So we also want a round collision mask that is smaller than the actual disc here, so that you actually can get really close, because it's more exciting to get away with something really dangerous than to get owned by it. Alright, rooms. Adding a room to Discroom is really easy. You do right click, create room. So that's half of the game done there. Since the character is 32 pixels, I'm gonna go with 320 by 320. Seems like a decent size to start with. And then we need some objects. Alright, so yeah, really, if you are unfamiliar with GameMaker and programming whatsoever, there are some really great tutorials out there. Like Tom Francis did a whole video series on how to get started from scratch with making games in GameMaker Studio 1 that I would recommend. But yeah, let's make our player. We want some movement. Step event. if you press the left keyboard, we want some horizontal speed to go to the left. So let's do something like this. So this is how I do my movement usually, and how it's done in Discroom as well. You cap the total speed, say like 6. It can't go over 6, and then you have some friction, like 1. And then we do that for every direction. Like honestly, all of this is super close to how we've actually made Discroom. Up and down. So now we can walk in 4 directions. We made an animation, so let's use that as well. If speed is larger than 0, sprite index is sprite player. Walk, else sprite index is sprite player. So now if you're moving, it should be the walking sprite, and if you're not moving, it should be the other sprite. It's gonna animate really fast. Let's actually see. We're running at a smooth 60 frames per second here. Let's put our player in the room. So if it's gonna play 60 frames per second of this stuff, it's not gonna look super good. So maybe we should go closer to like, I don't know, 10 times less. Alright, let's run the game. It's always exciting to run it for the first time. And we can move around. That feels pretty good. So I think for dodging games in general, I always like it when there's very high friction, so you can move very precisely. Even though there's a tiny bit of acceleration and smoothness, it is still very much a game where you can make snap decisions and your kind of reflexes get respected. Let's add a disc. How about that? Alright. But we need something to spawn the disc. So I'm gonna make a controller. I'm gonna call it cont because that's shorter, and we're gonna write that a bunch of times. So that thing is gonna have a timer. Not alarm. 30 frames, so after half a second it's gonna drop the first disc. So this is when the timer happens. Instance create XY disc, and then set another timer for say 60 frames every second, another disc. Might be too much. Let's do every second and a half. So this thing's called disc, and it has to move in a random direction. Let's say higher speed than the player, maybe, or not. Let's say speed 6. Our max speed was what? Also 6. That's gonna be an exciting chase, you know. So that's solid stuff. And then the discs also need to bounce in the room. I am all over the place here. So we have that controller that spawns the stuff. It needs to be in the room, and I'm actually gonna make that create the player as well. So this is the controller. It should move to the center of the room because that's where we want to spawn the discs. And it should create the player. But not in the center of the room, but slightly lower, so how about there? Then, so after half a second it's going to start spawning discs. We'll have something to look at. Just keep on testing your own games. It's like a chef cooking, you need to taste it. Alright, we have discs spawning. They're not spinning and they're not bouncing, so let's do that next. So the disc step event. Let's make them spin fast. Let's say 10 degrees per frame. And then we need to make them bounce. So GameMaker has some built-in bounce code, but if you think about it, bouncing is something really quite basic. What you want to do is, if the X position is lower than a certain value, you want to move horizontally to the right, and if it's larger than a certain value, you want to move to the left. So we can do something like that. Let's say so if the X position is less than 0, we set the horizontal speed to be an absolute horizontal speed, so it will always move to the right. And likewise, if it's larger than the size of the room, we set it to absolute negative kind of horizontal speed. So that takes care of bouncing left and right, and we do the same for up and down. And it should use the room height here. And now we should have discs bouncing. They move really fast, it feels dangerous, but yeah, we're already getting close to having disc room gameplay here. I can't die yet, let's do that right away. I think a mistake a lot of people make when they're building new prototypes is you can't really go game over. There are no like win or lose conditions in games where they are going to have those. But you need to get a feel for that, so I would always recommend adding that right away. Don't have any spikes in your game that you can die from. Get a feel for it. So if you touch a disc, we destroy the player. Likewise, we need a restart button then. So if you press the letter R, let's restart the game. Alright, let's close all of these windows. Save our project, very important, and let's give it a try. So my collision mask there just saved me. Alright, it works. Let's add some score, make it more interesting. So the controller object is gonna have a thing called time, I guess. Time is 0. So every frame we're just gonna add 1 point to the time. If instance exists, if the player exists, time adds up. And then we want to draw that somewhere. For that we need a nice font, so I'm gonna add some Comic Sans or something cute that fits the style, you know, appropriate use here. Never miss a chance where you can actually use something well designed. Alright, so let's draw. In the draw event for the controller, draw, set font 0, draw text. We're gonna have a view later on, a camera, so I'm gonna keep that into account. These are obviously not the best coding practices to do something like this. I don't care, I just want to show you how you can effectively and quickly make something like this. Time. Here you go. Beautiful. Draw the score. And then if you die, we might as well show a message. If the player doesn't exist, we will draw a text lower with an enter here. Game over. We can be more creative, have more fun. Don't touch the discs. Press R to restart. There you go, that should do the trick. Let's play our game. We're getting somewhere here. Whoa, error, alright. The timer is not set before reading it. Did I call it something else? It was called time. Did I here call it time? I think 50% of programming is finding typos and miscalculations that you made, and the thing that you actually get better at over time is finding those really quickly. Alright, there we go. Now we can get a high score, but it's just showing the frames now and not the seconds. So I want to fix that real quick. Time should be divided by 60 because that's our room speed. So now we'll see it in seconds and not in frames, hopefully. So honestly, we could stop here and it would already show you how to make disc group. Like, that's how simple this game is, and that's also why we fell in love with the concept of just making something really simple and trying to build a full game out of it. 427, pretty good score, if I might say so myself. But let's make things a bit better. Let's add a little camera movement to make it feel more dynamic to start. Let's see. Fuse. I want to make it widescreen. I'm thinking 640 by 360. It's a nice 16 by 9 resolution. And then that's gonna be the room, which is gonna be in the center. So I need a nice little outline there to fit the art style, the beautiful art style that we've created here. Let's see. Big black lines. Alright, let's... This is the hardest part of making games. I don't know how artists and sound designers do all that stuff. It's like some magic from another dimension. Alright, and let's give it a different color slightly. Nice. Yeah, how about that? Some rusty copper. And then make that the background here. Alright, so we have at least kind of a defined playing area, and then the color behind that. Never use the default colors. You have to move this like slightly to show that you're a professional. So, camera, we want it to... So let's do it a bit fancy. Let's make some variables here. And make it kind of follow the player, but also try and stay to in the center of the room. So we're defining view X. The view X position is the player position plus the controller's position, which is the center of the room. But more, it should follow the center of the room more. So we're doing that 1 times 3 and dividing all of this by 4, and we're getting a nice average then. And then, since it's the camera, we need to offset it by kind of half of the screen width, so that this sets the position of the left top corner of the screen. So let's do the same for the Y, and then we're going to smoothly move to that position. So this is the actual thing the game maker uses, view X view. That should become itself minus itself. This is just math that I once saw in a tutorial. It's called lerping. I don't understand it, but I use it. It should do the trick, and then smoothly move to this position that we've created. It should only do this if the player exists, because otherwise we'll get an error. Likewise, we should probably also only spawn disks when the player exists. Alright, let's see. Before putting this file online, I'll add some comments to the code and some nice indenting. I know people go wild for that stuff, so... Alright, there we go. Nice dynamic camera. The background is looping right now, which looks a bit weird. So let's disable that soon, but let's go for a high score. We can do 10 seconds. No, we can't. Alright. The background should not be tiny. Let's see. One quick test. Perfect. Good score too. So one of the things that we do in the full game that really helps kind of carry the gameplay is the discs wait a bit before they're lethal in the center of the room. And also, right now, I can just walk out of the room. We gotta fix that. So let's do those two things. First of all, I'm just gonna copy the bounce code for that because I am lazy. You should not work like this, apparently, but it works. Alright, there we go. We can make a script for that. That's actually what you're supposed to do, called script bounce, so that we're not copy pasting this code. But actually I'm not doing that, never mind. We might want to add some stuff to the disks later. So back to the disks. They're not going to be lethal right away. That was what we were going for. So I'm going to make them transparent and set a timer to, I don't know, let's give you 40 frames. It's not half a second, but it's enough to see them and respawn. After the timer they should move and they should not be transparent anymore. And then the player should recognize that if you touch a disc, and it needs to be not transparent. Otherwise you can walk through it. So we can no longer walk out of the room, which is a good thing. And you can get killed by discs, which is great. Can we walk through those? Looks like it. Yeah, okay, this is perfect. This is what we want. I'm actually gonna make the discs a bit slower. I think it's too difficult for me right now. I think, so this is also why it's so important to get the gameplay things into your game right away, because you'll be encountering them a lot, and while you're working on it, you might realize like, hey, I want to change this a bit. And the things that are going to get changed the most are going to be the most polished in the end, so you want to get them in early so they can get a lot of playtime in. Alright, we have that tweak thing done, and what I kind of also want to do is at the start of the game I'm gonna spawn a bunch of discs to fill the room quickly. So let's make a variable in the spawner. Room filler is 4. So at the start, when that alarm goes, if room filler is larger than 0, it sets the timer to only 10 frames. Otherwise, it does the slow thing, and then we want to kind of reduce room filler by 1. This way, we kind of skip the whole slow build up. I think what we really tried is get the game cranked up right away. It should be about surviving 10 seconds in a full room, and not about, you know, playing the build up until there's like 6 discs in the room and then having to survive for that whole long while. This is pretty advanced. Also, I just realized we just made a whole game about saw blades, so I should probably really lower the difficulty, because people playing this are not gonna have as good of a time as I'm having right now. So let's make these real slow and actually give you more time to respond here. Let's make them 3.5, beautiful number. There we go. So now it's actually kind of playable, more reasonable. You get more exciting moments too, right? I think the room should fill up slower once we have a bunch of discs in place as well. But then I'm gonna continue making stuff. Slow this down, and also we just want 3 of these. Okay, so there's a little problem here that you often have with bouncing stuff if it's completely predictable. Discs that spawn at right angles, for example, are just gonna keep following the same path. So we want to add a bit of a random offset here. And also, like with DVD screens with the bouncing thing, they rarely go in the corner. So this is technically safer than staying in the middle of the room, and that's not necessarily super fun. So I want to add a disc that goes around the room and kind of kills everything close to the wall, which is how we do it in this room as well, at least in the first area. So we're doing a wall disc, and we're adding a random offset to the bounce. And if we're doing stuff with the bounce, we might as well make a spark effect for the discs bouncing. I need 3 frames for that, maybe. It's 1. 2. 3. Perfect. Create an object, spark effects. So when this animation ends, it should destroy. It should not animate at 60 frames per second, so we're setting its image speed to 0.2, and let's do a random rotation between 0 and 360 degrees. So then for the discs, when they're bouncing, let's see if that happens. Variable bounce should be false by default, but if they bounce is true. Let's copy that. That's also programming is all about knowing when to copy paste and when to type something out. So now every time that it bounces, it sets bounce to true, but otherwise it's false. So we can check if bounced is true. We want to create a spark effect, and we want to add a bit of a random offset to the direction. So now they're less predictable in their bounces, and you get more kind of a random spread filling up the room, and you can't really get a super lucky thing where every disc goes exactly to the right or something. Sparks and random offset. So that's great. This is done. Time for the wall discs. And then we should probably add some sounds and make some more effects for the player, and then maybe some screen shake. And then we call it a rep, right? Wall disc. I'm gonna make that one slightly larger just because it looks cool. Let's do the same trick. I wonder what artists have to say about this saw blade drawing technique, if they're like, wow, wish I knew about that, or maybe they're like, oh yeah, we've been doing it like that for centuries. It's a very traditional method. This one has a slightly different shape. Just because it's cool. Perfect. Beautiful. Alright, and then we need to... I'm gonna use the same color gray, I don't care. Center this, and then we also need to give it a collision mask that gives you some space. So that's basically the bit that the player can touch, right? Let's do 10. That little dark bit is dangerous. And this one's gonna move on a path around the room, so we can use paths for that, or we can use code, but that would take a long time, so we're adding some points to a path. There you go. That's a square. Alright. Same size as the room. Then we're gonna add the wall disc. I always forget the code for path, so I'm just gonna use drag and drop for now. Set a path, path 0, speed, it should be fast, 8. At the end, it continues from there. Relative, absolute, because it's using the room coordinates, which is fine. And then the player, if it touches that, it should do the same as this. You should also probably use scripts or parents for this, but once again, this is a quick example. Actually, I'm gonna do that. Whatever, I'm lazy today. Alright, so this should get created as well. At the start, it creates the player, and it creates the wall disc. There you go. It's not spinning yet. Gotta add that. But it is deadly. And now we can't really hide in the corner as well. You gotta be more careful, which is good. Spinning. This one can spin slower. I need some variation. Image angle. This is 5. That adds 5 to it every frame. Alright. Let's see how this looks. Then we can work on some game feel. Very important stuff. Full screen, let's do it. I'm terrible at this version of disc room. It's really hard. Too many discs in the room. Alright, 12 seconds, that's a pretty decent score. I hate that gray background color. Let's make that something else. darker and a bit green so it goes with the other stuff. I don't know. Will probably look terrible. How about that? Okay. Gore. I'm gonna draw some bones because I want to keep this like family friendly, unlike the real disc room, which has blood or confetti for the confetti lovers out there. You can change the color, you can even turn off the door, but I don't have time to make a settings menu for this, so I'm gonna go with bones. Let's copy this, but make it a bone. You don't need it to get destroyed when the animation ends. Actually, we just need the random angle from this. And then it should move in a random direction. With a random kind of speed, something like this. Add some friction. These are just gonna burst out of the player and then come to a halt. So when you die, when the player object gets destroyed, we want to drop 6 bones, because humans have 6 bones in their body, that way it's anatomically correct. Perfect. Yeah, that green is much better, don't you feel? Oh, and the bones are nice too. Alright, perfect. Yeah, now we're talking. So when you feel like just pressing R and playing again, you know you're onto something with the game, right? That's a good feeling. Don't touch the discs. That's good advice too. Like, this game tutorializes itself. I'm happy. Alright, let's add some screen shake. So for the controller object that also controls the camera, let's say shake is 0. Then when the player dies, cont.shake. It adds like 10 to that because that's a good value. All these values you can just mess with if you don't really understand programming. Just change them, make it 20, see what happens. So to the camera here, we're gonna add the random shake minus the shake divided by 2. So this means that every frame, if the shake is 10, it can be anywhere between like plus 5 and minus 5. So it just kind of shakes, right? And then we want to slowly decrease the shake. So if shake is like 0, shake goes down by 0.5. So now if you die, the screen should shake. There we go. It could be more, really. But also, I know some people don't like screen shake. So maybe this is fine. I don't know. Let's do a tiny bit more. Let's make it 12. Why not? Alright. So we've got a pretty decent little thing here you can work with, you can riff off. I'm gonna add some sound though. We have very generously, Doseone has made some sound effects ready for you to use. I'm gonna add some of them to this real quick. Let's add some deaf gore sounds. Sound def 1. So a cool trick with sound design is you need some variation. So we're gonna add 3 different def sounds. Sound def 1, sound def 2, and then on def the player is gonna play a random one. Audio. Sound. It's gonna choose sound def 1, sound def. So every time you die, you're gonna be surprised which one. Priority 1. Oops. No. Let's see how that sounds. That's loud. I love it. Alright. Also a good tip is put every sound in the middle when you make a game so you can mix and then this audio later. But let's see, what other sounds have we got here? Bounce sounds for the discs. I'm gonna use that, actually not for bouncing but for disc spawning. Let's add all 4, why not? Put this really low because that's a sound that's just gonna be playing kind of on the regular. Let's copy this. And it should really play when they start moving, not when they spawn. So audio, play, sound, choose. There we go. Priority to whatever. I don't know if it's how that works. Doesn't loop. Alright, so now we got this sound. What else have we got? Let's do one more thingy for now. Doors, feeds. Oh, there are spawn sounds. Whatever. Use them in your own way, right? Deathcore, cinematic. These are really cool. I'm gonna play that when you start the game. That's gonna be... wait, that's not. Audio play sound. Priority 0, loops false. This one shouldn't be that loud. Let's try. Sound spawn 1 was missing, so always look at this. Sometimes GameMaker messes up and then it uses the Windows ding sound. You don't want that. See, you get all that kind of nonsense. We don't want that. We want this. Alright, let's go. Sounds good. I am kinda missing the bounce sounds, so maybe we messed up here. Alright, you know what? We did mess up there. This sound should play when you bounce, but also we have to be careful there because it is gonna be playing a lot. Tricky. So in this room, in the full game, a lot of the audio is pretty complex and we only play sounds like really close to the player. See, this is just not really clever. I'm gonna not do this. I'm gonna do them on spawn. Because also, this should not be too cool, right? You have to make something yourself with this that is better than its origins. No, but really, so in like a bit over half an hour, we now have kind of the basic premise of this room. We have wall this, we have this spawning, there's a high score, you can restart. We have some sounds, some effects. We have a fancy camera, there's screen shake. I'm really happy with this. So I hope that this was useful. I'm gonna spend the next bit cleaning up the code, adding some comments. It will be downloadable for you, like the sound pack. And go have fun with it. Thank you so much for watching.